Either reflect or take into account the proximity of the United States. Living next to you is in some ways like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly or even tempered is the beast, if I can call it that, one is affected by every twitch and grunt.
That war will never let us go, not till the last one of us is gone. In the Royal Canadian Legion, called us mercenaries.
I was ready to give my life for the United States of America.
A lot of people think that Canada wasn't in a war from Korea to Afghanistan, but there was a generation that served in Vietnam.
This is the house I grew up in, 732. A fellow's house, Mr. Whitehead, he had his house there. It's torn down now. It got awards for one of the nicest parks in the city for a long time. Yeah, this is the grade school I was telling you we went to. Grandfather used to work in the railway, and he opened the baggage car door when he went by the railway tracks there and threw candy out for me. This is my house here. This is the POW MIA flag. It's the only flag that's allowed to fly in government buildings in the U.S. This is a picture of my friend Larry that was killed in action in Vietnam, and a few more of my pictures and paraphernalia. This is a parachute after I got out of the service. Did some skydiving. It's an old military parachute. The last jump I made was 2 years ago. I was 70 years old then.
Who's there in the picture?
That's me when I went to jump school. My name is Rob Purvis. I was born here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I'm a Canadian who fought in Vietnam.
To understand the Vietnam War, let's start from the beginning.
Vietnam is a small nation with a rich history dating back to antiquity. For centuries, it had been ruled by successive Chinese dynasties, and during times of independence, rival factions and political infighting ravaged the country. The first Westerners to arrive were Portuguese missionaries in the 16th century. After the French muscled their way in a century later, they expelled the Portuguese and took the country by force in the mid-1800s. They called this new colony and the surrounding lands they controlled Indochina, blessed with an abundance of natural resources like zinc, tin, and coal. The French industrialized Indochina and turned it into a major exporter. One example is the French-owned Michelin, which used local high-quality rubber to become one of the world's leading tire companies. But overall, Indochina was a money pit. In an effort to help a handful of companies reap huge profits, the French government spent millions a year to keep an overtaxed and underpaid people in line. During World War II, Japan muscled their way in on Indochina. They forced the French to not only give up control of all major airports and harbors, but to accept the stationing of 30,000 troops. The man most responsible for ending foreign rule in Southeast Asia came to power during this time. His name was Ho Chi Minh, which in Vietnamese means the Enlightened One. Ho Chi Minh was actually born Nguyen Sinh Cung in 1890 in a small village in central Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh helped found the Indo-Chinese Communist Party in 1930 and the League for the Independence of Vietnam, or Viet Minh, in 1941. When the Japanese surrendered in 1945, the Viet Minh took control of the north. France, though, wasn't ready to give up its colony without a fight. From 1946 to 1954, it fought the Viet Minh in a conflict known as the First Indochina War, but it was of no use. The communist revolutionaries wore the French down, bringing 100 years of rule to an end at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. A few days later in Switzerland, the French and North Vietnamese signed the Geneva Accords, which meant the end of French rule in Indochina and the birth of three nations: Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Vietnam would be temporarily divided along the 17th parallel. The communists would control the north and the non-communists the south. The agreement also called for an election to be held 2 years later in 1956, where the people would decide who would rule over unified Vietnam. But the United States refused to sign the Geneva Accords. With Ho Chi Minh incredibly popular, a free election meant all of Vietnam would fall under communist control. Still, the Geneva Accords were a reality, and to make sure they were implemented, the International Control Commission, or ICC, was created. 3 countries made up the ICC: Poland, India, and Canada. Desperate to keep South Vietnam in the world market system, President Eisenhower sent hundreds of military personnel to train, equip, and advise their army, the ARVN. Even future Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson warned colleagues that the advance of Russian communist imperialism must be stopped.
Is it on? I think so.
Let's double check a second.
It's blinking, yeah.
Is it a recorded thing there? Yeah, I think it's going. Oh, perfect.
My name is Rob Purvis. I was born here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, 1947. Actually, I grew up 2 or 3 streets away from here, so back to where I was when I was a kid.
Winnipeg is also a city of attractive suburban homes, a far cry from those first log cabins of the Red River Valley.
My family life was good. I had 2 brothers and a sister, and my father was an electrician. He was away quite a bit because he worked construction jobs and such. It was a good childhood. It was a working class neighborhood, and all our families were most of the Second World War veterans. It was a close-knit community.
Did you always want to be a soldier?
No, it just sort of happened. I guess it spur of the moment thing, and me and my friends decided to join the American Army.
Who were the guys?
Butch Buffy, his brother Billy Buffy, and Larry Collins. I grew up with Larry, Billy, and Butch. We grew up all in this neighborhood since we were maybe 6 years old. We went to grade school and high school together, and I would spend a lot of time at Butch and Billy's house and Larry's house. We're all part of sort of all an extended family in each other's houses. During that time, everybody had 4 or 5 kids in their house, but it was a real small, close-knit community.
My name is Ron Parks. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba in 1943. I think I had quite the normal childhood. I had, a few friends, and we get in a little bit of trouble once in a while, but nothing serious. I had a relatively boring childhood. My father and 4 of my uncles and 1 aunt served in World War II. My grandfather served in World War I. While I was in high school, I was in the militia in a tank regiment here in Winnipeg, the Fort Garry Horse. I had wanted to make a career of the Canadian Armed Forces, but when we graduated from school, a buddy and myself went to join, and we were told that there was a waiting list to get in because the ranks were frozen because of John Diefenbaker's austerity program. Being 19 years old, we didn't really want to wait 6 months to a year to maybe get into the service. So one of us had the bright idea, let's check the Americans out. The United States of America welcomed us. They were very happy to see us. We took the physical. They helped us process the paperwork, and next thing you know, we were sworn into the United States Army in Fargo, North Dakota. It was a Saturday morning, and I guess it was probably a slow morning for the recruiting sergeant. He was sitting there at his desk with his feet on his desk, reading the newspaper, and when we walked in, he looked over the paper and he said, "What can I do for you boys?" And we said, "We're down from Canada, we want to join the Army." And the newspaper went flying, he jumped to his feet, he came running over to us and shook our hand. He said, "Sit down, you Canadians make good soldiers." I did my basic at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I did my artillery training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. From there I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for paratrooper training. And from Georgia I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is the home of the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles. And for the next couple of years I was a proud Screaming Eagle.
Whoa, Rob, I've got to ask. Why would you go down to the States and enlist? Were you afraid of communism?
No, I think maybe that had a little bit to do with it. Part of it was we watched the news every night at 6 o'clock, and it was the war in Vietnam. And I believed that we went down there and signed up because we were young, and our fathers were all veterans, and we thought we were going to be helping the people of South Vietnam.
Vietnam came along in '65. We actually went by ship. We left San Francisco under the Golden Gate Bridge and 20 days across the Pacific Ocean with a one-day stopover in Subic Bay in the Philippines, which is a big naval bay. Next day, I pulled out of Civic Bay, and the day after, we saw the white sands and beautiful palm trees of South Vietnam. It was a gorgeous-looking place until we got ashore. There was bugs, it was hot, it was back in the Middle Ages. Most of my service in the U.S. Armed Forces was, we were geared up to fight against the Russians in Europe. So plans would be to drop us behind enemy lines to hold bridges and strategic positions to slow the Russians down if they invaded Germany. But once we got to Vietnam, it became apparent it was a helicopter war. We didn't talk to them, but we could see they suffered. I said a little earlier, it was like being in the Middle Ages, and it truly was. They were out there in the rice fields with their oxen and doing everything by hand, and they had nothing. We check out some huts that they're living in, there's nothing there. A hole in the center of the roof for the smoke to go out, a couple of beds that weren't what we consider beds, and some rugs on the floor, and that was it. They were very poor people. And the war was making it much worse for them because we were destroying crops. If our infantry units came under fire from the village, they'd call us to place artillery rounds into the village. After firing a few shots, the enemy were probably gone by the time we laid the artillery in. But we destroyed a village, and who are the people mad at us? Mad at us because we destroyed the village. When you're taking fire from somewhere, you have to fire back. Simple as that. The first battle we were involved in was on Operation Gibraltar. One of our infantry battalions landed right in the middle of 3 battalions of Viet Cong. The first lift came in, not a shot was fired. The second lift of helicopters come in, 24 out of 28 helicopters were hit, 4 couldn't take off. And it was actually not a battalion, it was about a company and a half of our airborne troops who were caught right in the middle. They were totally surrounded. And later on in the afternoon, darkness fell. We couldn't get them resupplied. We were listening on the radio frequencies to their calls for help. They wanted ammunition, water, barrels for the machine guns, and they were helpless to do anything. So the next morning we got helicopters to bring our artillery in closer. We fired 1,000 rounds per gun in a 24-hour period, putting fire around where those paratroopers were surrounded. We ruined the recoil mechanisms in our howitzers. We were pounding them for 24 hours, and finally they broke off. They found close to 300 bodies on the field. How many were dragged away, we know how many wounded. But we lost 13 paratroopers killed, 33 wounded. And at that time, that was the biggest loss in a single battle in the war. The United States Army at that time was better trained, better equipped, better led than it had ever been in the history of the United States. We had everything we needed. We had the best weapons, we had good leadership. The biggest problem for our commanders, I believe, was getting to fight a war that they weren't used to. And it's a typical thing that the military trains for the last war they fought. This one was totally different from World War II. So some of the ideas they had, the methods, might have worked in Europe and in WW2, but it sure as hell didn't work in Vietnam.
Back in 1967, in the late fall, we decided to enlist in the American Army, so we drove down to Grand Forks, North Dakota, U.S. Army recruiting station, and they were very glad to see us, and They gave us all the paperwork to fill in. We had to come back and get medical, police record check, and go to the American consulate to get a visa. That took probably a month, 3 weeks to get all that done. And it was right in the fall, and we decided we weren't going to go back until after Christmas because we didn't want to go in the army and right at Christmas time and disrupt it for our families and everything, so we stayed home for Christmas.
Rob had to get American citizenship because the Foreign Enlistment Act banned Canadians from serving in foreign militaries. The Americans, though, found a way around this. They set up recruiting offices in Washington and New York specifically designed to give Canadians a visa and U.S. citizenship. Armed with dual citizenship, the Canadian could volunteer for the U.S. Army.
We went back in February of '68, and I think the recruiter almost fell on the floor when he saw us because he didn't believe we'd ever come back.
Did anybody try to talk you out of enlisting?
Yeah, I guess when we first told everybody we were going to go join the American Army, nobody was especially our family wasn't too thrilled about it. Now you can understand that now. But we were young and adventurous, and we just wanted to go see the world. We all went together under they called it the Canadian Body Plan. We went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and we all went together for basic training. After that, we all got split up. We all went our individual ways. Actually, we all ended up in the four corners of the United States. Larry Collins went into the infantry. He stayed in Fort Lewis. I went down to Fort Ord, California. Butch, I believe he went to Fort Benning, Georgia. And Billy went to Maryland. Larry was the first to get orders to go. And shortly after that, Butch and Billy went to Vietnam. I went through jump school and more training, and I got assigned down to Special Forces in Panama Canal. I spent a year there. When Larry got killed, that's when I volunteered for Vietnam, and a couple months later, I ended up going to Vietnam. I went to the 4th Infantry Division in Pleiku, and from there I volunteered to go to a Ranger Company. The Ranger Company was a small unit. We did all the long-range recon patrols for the 4th Infantry Division. Basically, we had a 4-man team, and they would send us out on a mission. It would probably last 4 or 5 days in the jungle. Either we went on a recon or an ambush mission, but most of the time it was recon, just checking out the areas and finding what was there. And then they would come back and get us when our 4 or 5 days were up. When I was in the Special Forces, I was granted a top secret crypto security clearance. I acted as a liaison between the division headquarters and our company. It would help pick areas where our teams would go, and I would brief the teams on where they're going to go in and debrief them again when they went out.
Is there anything difficult you want to talk about?
Yeah, there was always lots of rough nights, or sometimes I didn't know if I'd be live to see the sunrise again. We lost quite a few friends there, and after a while you didn't try to get too personal with people because you didn't know if they were going to make it or not, or you were going to make it. So part of the thing for a while, we called everybody Jack. Everybody was Jack, so.
Do you want to know their names?
No, we just called everybody Jack. My wife still calls me Jack, because funny story, but that's.
Want to say it?
Yeah, she just, when I phoned her up once when I started dating, I said, "It's Jack phoning."
She got it?
So who's Jack? I was sort of in a unique position. Everybody in our company was a volunteer, so we sort of had the cream of the crop. Everybody there was there to do a job, and we all looked after each other, make sure that we're all going to stay safe. Everybody I talked to, when they found out I was Canadian, they thought we're all crazy. What are you doing here? But after a while, it didn't really matter where you're from or what color you were in our company. Everybody was just got together, and it was survival, and it didn't matter what's your nationality, where you're from. Everybody was a GI. After when Larry got killed, it was a big shock. It wasn't fun anymore. It was all over. It was down to fighting and staying alive. Larry was killed in an ambush I guess in May of '69. I'm not really sure what happened, but I think he was coming back from a village late at night, and he walked through a Arvin ambush, and he was killed, him and a couple of other guys. I was sort of devastated. I got sent a telegram about him being killed, but I didn't get it for 3 weeks later. And when I got the telegram, I went and talked to my commanding officer, and they arranged for me to come home, but I arrived home the day after the funeral. I didn't get home till Sunday, and Larry's funeral was on Saturday.
You know, you were basically ignored. Nobody cared about it. We weren't called baby killers or anything like that. People just, you happen to mention you were in Vietnam and the war, and who cares? So what? So for a vast majority of us, we just never spoke of it for 20 odd years later until we formed our Canadian Vietnam Veterans Association.
So you kept everything bottled up all those years?
All those years. You know, once you realize nobody wanted to talk about it, nobody was interested, you know, just keep it to yourself.
Good morning, everybody. This is your Welcome to Winnipeg show. There's a beautiful summer day waiting out there for you. Winnipeg's temperature right now, a sunny 75 and climbing. The weatherman says it's going up to a pleasant 82 today with clear skies. Long-range forecast, more of the same.
I felt glad to get out of there. It was a big relief. It took me 24 hours to fly out back from Vietnam to the States. I out-processed out of the Army. It took roughly another 24 hours. And 48 hours out of Vietnam, I was back in the streets of Winnipeg. It was all over. That was a real culture shock for me. It was just really strange. I hadn't slept for probably a week, and I still couldn't sleep. You know, just you're wired, and it just like a dream happened. It was over. It ended abruptly. But after I come back here, there was nobody to talk to. There was nobody, nowhere to go. The Legion wouldn't accept us. Even if there was no Vietnam veterans here. There's nobody to talk to, so I just really didn't talk about it.
Did you bottle everything up?
I guess I did. Well, you couldn't. There was nobody to talk to about it, so I didn't talk about. It was really difficult. Nobody would understand what you went through anyway, so we just didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it, but it did have a lot of effects, I guess, throughout my whole life. That experience, you never get over it. I seen Butch quite often, and we talked about it between the two of us, but that was all there was. Only one we had to talk to, really, is Butch. Billy was more distant. Billy ended up marrying Larry Collins' sister, and they still didn't want too much part of that. I guess they wanted to forget about it. So I didn't see him that much. I went to school under the GI Bill, so they helped pay my way through university. So I spent the next 3-4 years just reading books, and so that was sort of my decompression, unwinding process after I came back.
The University of Manitoba, while young by comparison to other establishments of higher learning, is one of the finest in the entire Dominion.
I went to the University of Manitoba, completed my Bachelor of Arts degree there. I really couldn't settle down. I had my degree, but I started working construction and I never quit. I just couldn't sit in an office or didn't want to do that. And I had a lot of issues. I didn't want to work for the government.
This Manitoba Tourist Information Center has the story on everything from ballet to boating.
I took orders for 3 years and I never wanted to take orders from anybody again. I just wanted to do my own thing. I worked all over. I've worked from the high Arctic. I was on the distant early warning line as far as north you can go, all the way to building high-rise construction in downtown Los Angeles. Pulp and paper mills. I spent a lot of time pipeline construction all over the country. But, they're big cities, and that's why I ended up coming home. Yeah, Winnipeg's been home for me. Like I said, I still live a block away from where I grew up.
Were you embarrassed to tell anybody you served in Nam?
No, I was never embarrassed to tell anybody I served in Vietnam, but most of the time I didn't talk about it until, I get to know people. I don't know whether it was right or wrong what we did, but we went and did it, and I am proud of my service. I went, I signed up, and I served. I did my 3 years.
Any regrets?
My only regret is Larry being killed. I really regret that, and it was a total shock to me and very disheartening. Especially on Memorial Day, Remembrance Day, I think about Larry and all the other friends I lost there.
This is back in the 80s. The first situation I had is the middle of the night I would find myself at the front door looking out the window I didn't know how long I'd been there, but I would kind of snap out of it somewhere along the way. I go back to bed. But I found this happening time again and again and again. There was nothing I could do about it or nothing I thought about it. I just thought I'm being a little weird. What happened next was I go to bed at night and I wake up in the morning with a loaded rifle beside my bed and no knowledge of getting up and loading a rifle. This continued not every night, but every once in a while for a period of time. And one morning, my wife, Connie, was making the bed. She lifted up my pillow, and I had a hunting knife under the pillow, not in a scabbard, just the knife itself. And she kind of freaked out. What if you killed me during the night? You know, I wouldn't do that, but you know, I had no idea why that knife was there.
Yeah, I think everybody that went through that Vietnam experience had issues with PTSD. Some it affected a lot more than others, and depending on the experiences you had over there, totally different. I know a lot of veterans are really affected by it. Affects their daily lives, and it's really horrible. They can't function. They don't sleep at night, and then it's really difficult to get up and go to work when you don't sleep all night. And a lot of them got into drugs and alcohol, trying to suppress the issues, and created a lot of problems. And that's where PTSD was coined, from studies with Vietnam veterans and the after effects of the war in Vietnam. I have a lot of issues with PTSD. I get flashbacks and issues of not sleeping. Like I said, it affects everybody.
Vietnam protests, did they bother you?
I was a little upset about the protesters. I sort of maybe took it personal, like they were protesting against the GIs that were there. I think it should have been more focused protesting against the government, not the troops that were serving there. People don't realize how tumultuous it was. It split families. A lot of those fellows that come up here that they can't ever talk to their fathers again, and a lot of them never went back. It was very difficult for them too. I could understand some of the draft dodgers coming up, but I didn't like the deserters. I thought that once you signed and take an oath of allegiance, you should fulfill that, and that's what I did. The kids today don't realize what it was like to be 18 years old back then in the States. Everybody was getting their draft notice during high school, and Their friends had got them 3, 4, 6 months earlier, and they were all coming home in body bags. They were going to their funerals. Now it was their turn. It was a really rocky time.
Have you ever met any of them?
Yeah, I've met some draft dodgers, and people came up here, and like I said, I don't have too much issues with them. You know, we all made decisions, and maybe I didn't agree with a lot of it, but said they don't agree with me, but I can learn to live with that, and that's fine.
My full name is Paul Dufo. I was born in Winnipeg. In 1969, I decided to go join the U.S. Armed Forces. My dad, half of his, there were 13 kids, I believe, and half of the family were born in Spencer, Massachusetts. Dad was part of the other half born in Canada. All I heard at home in my young days is how beautiful the United States are, and the United States can do no harm. They're the greatest.
Of all things Americans are, we are makers.
So I was born into loving the United States of America, and I still do at my old age, you know. That's probably why I went to Vietnam. I signed up for 3 years, U.S. Army Regular Army, and I put in my 3 years. After that, I signed up for an extra year in the North Dakota National Guard. So I got a 4-year credit of active duty. I served 1 year in Germany, and from there, I didn't like the duty there in Germany. A lot of spit polish and short haircuts and all that good stuff. And I didn't like it, and had bumped into some Vietnam veterans, and they said, well, why don't you 1049 out of here? And that's a request of transfer. And that's when I put in a request to go to Vietnam, so it was totally volunteer. Started with the 4th Infantry Division in An Khê, and from there the 4th Infantry Division deactivated, and they shipped me out to the Americal Division in the Chu Lai region, which is all in the central Vietnam, Central Highlands. We were good to the orphanage. A lot of them were admiration kids. We'd buy them things and drinks and food and toys and things like that we could get for them. Some of my friends were more adventurous than I was, and they went there for adventure. That's fine. I have nothing against that. Or if they went in to learn a trade or whatever, that's great. But myself, I felt like I owed something to the United States of America, because I was in the era of the Cold War, and I knew if it wasn't for the United States of America, we'd be under the rule of the Russian bear. And I've always thought that we weren't doing our fair share in Canada, and this was my opportunity to thank them. And I was ready to give my life. And not that I would not give my life for Canada. I love Canada, but there's something special about the United States for me. It's just me. I'm red, white, and blue blood. I'm very proud to have served in the United States of America, the United States Armed Forces, and in Vietnam. There was the war at that time, and no, I have no regrets.
Would you do it all over again?
Yes, and even at my old age, I would.
Even now today?
Yes, I would go. I'd leave right now to help the United States of America. Even though I'm an old man now, I would not mind putting a turret on my wheelchair to fight for the United States.
I guess it was in the fall of '85, somebody in Winnipeg here laid a wreath on behalf of Canadian and Vietnam veterans. And I was intrigued, and I got a hold of this fellow, and so did a couple other veterans here, and we got together and we had coffee. That's how I came up with the idea, is, wow, there's more veterans out here. And after 16 years, I started talking about it, and I couldn't stop, and I came up with the idea, well, there's got to be more of us out there. We sort of talked about going to see the wall in Washington, and says, well, let's try and get everybody to go. So I started writing letters to the editor, and I sent it to all the major cities across Canada, and that's how the Canadian Vietnam Veterans Association started. I got a lot of media exposure, and it sort of really took off and went viral. And when we went to Washington, we had over 100 Canadian veterans and 2 Gold Star mothers that accompanied us on this trip. And after I found out later, there was lots that never heard about us until it was over. We had no money. I had no money for a budget. I had nothing, just whatever we could get off radio and TV, free publicity.
Were you shocked by the response?
I was. It just got more and more, and I was really elated that we got so many veterans that came out and wanted to go on this trip. I met Jan Scruggs. He was the originator of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and he acted as our master of ceremony at our little service we had in Washington. We got a really good reception when we went to Washington. All the major networks were there filming it, and to make the news in Washington, it's a big accomplishment because they have protests and stuff going on every single day there.
I met Rob in April of 1986. He had previously sent ads out to newspapers wanting to know if there was any other Canadians that had served in the U.S. Armed Forces as he had and his friends. And somebody got the word to me. I ended up coming to maybe the second or third meeting that the CVVA had, and I've been a member ever since, and damn proud of it. We've helped a lot of Canadians that didn't know they could access their service benefits, and a number of different things. A lot of times, even if all we did was hook them up with a service officer down in the States, we got them started. We got the process going, because this was another thing that didn't happen when we got out. Nobody told us to see a service officer. Nobody told us we had benefits of any kind. There's loan benefits, there was mortgage benefits, there was educational benefits. They told us about nothing. I found out about the educational benefits 11 years after I got out, and you could only access those education benefits for 10 years after.
We had chapters set up in most of the major cities across Canada. Since then, they've all died out. If we're all getting older, and attrition and issues like PTSD and Agent Orange sort of decimated our ranks. Back in those days, there was a reciprocal agreement between Canada and U.S. that we take care of each other's veterans. So that if an American veteran was living in Canada, he could go to the Veterans Affairs and get treatment here. And Canadians, if they're living down in the States, they'd go to Veterans Affairs there and get treatment. It was a reciprocal agreement between First World War, Second World War, and Korea. But there was a glitch in the system that Vietnam veterans weren't eliminated from this process. We had to get an act in Congress changed so Vietnam veterans would also get the treatment on both sides of the border.
September of 1986, there was about 100 of us made a pilgrimage to Washington. Rob and myself and a few others were chosen to speak to members of the Congress and the Senate. We did so. We were welcomed. We were told that they were going to do everything they could do for us. And a bill getting us our benefits up here in Canada was put in place 18 months later. And they tell us for a bill like that to go through Congress and the Senate in 18 months is almost unheard of. But they told us, they said, you served our country, we're going to do everything we can for you.
The American Legion was a really big support down there. They set up all the meetings, and everything went really well. There was no opposition to it. It was just more of a paperwork issue of getting this passed through Congress. Within a year and a half, it was signed by the President of the United States. Congressman Lane Evans, he was one of the main driving forces behind the initiative for us. He was on the Veterans Affairs Committee and he helped push it through.
So that was the thing that really, I guess, got us going and keeps us going when they, when it seems like hard times, when you don't meet anybody or see anybody for months, and it looks like we're going nowhere. Something will happen. We'll meet somebody that needs a hand or something, and we're back in the game.
Well, we have our memorial wall, and on our wall we have, I think it's 149 names of Canadians that were killed in Vietnam right now. We've taken her to Calgary and quite a few places, veterans events in the States, and one of the biggest comments, or the biggest comment we always get is, I didn't know Canadians served in Vietnam. It's just not known, and whether it's in Canada or the United States.
Are you shocked?
Nobody knows about Canadians that served. We just went across the border and blended in with the Americans. I didn't know other Canadians joined till later, 16 years later.
National with Knowlton Nash.
Good evening. It was revealed today that Agent Orange, a controversial and potentially dangerous chemical defoliant, was tested in Canada by the American Army. The Canadian military has confirmed that it helped with the New Brunswick tests in 1966. The experiments at base Gagetown have set off a major controversy. The New Brunswick Minister of Health is promising an investigation, and so is the Armed Forces Surgeon General.
The war is not over for us yet. Last year, I came down with Parkinson's disease. It's been traced back to the chemical defoliant they used in Vietnam called Agent Orange. And the war, I've been back for 54 years, and the war caught up to me. And Parkinson's, eventually it's going to get worse and worse and worse. I feel fortunate that it didn't strike me till this age. But that war will never let us go. Not till the last one of us is gone.
Got to ask, why go back to Vietnam?
Yes, I went back there in 93. I sort of just woke up one day and I told my wife I'm going to go back to Vietnam, and she says, well, you're not going back without me. So we pulled my 10-year-old son at the time out of school, and we left about 2 weeks later. Spur of the moment, we booked our flights and went to Vietnam. Flew into Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, and there we backpacked and made our way up all the way to Hanoi. It took us roughly a month.
How did it feel?
It was like going into a time warp. I never really made it back to some of the areas I served in because they were off limits at the time. I went and visited the area where my friend Larry got killed. I went to the tunnels of Cu Chi, and while I was there, a fellow that was touring us around right at the tunnels of Cu Chi, he served in a NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, and we all sat down at a picnic table and had a beer together. The people were very nice. I've got no animosity against the South Vietnamese people. The whole trip was very therapeutic, and I think even for my wife to try and understand what I went through, and my son, being 10 years old at the time, maybe he was a little bit young, but he did pick up a lot on it. My son's been with us, going to picnics in the States with the veterans and being part of this whole issue for all his life too, so. Back when we first came out, Canadian Vietnam veterans were not accepted as members in the Royal Canadian Legion. One time we had a little service at the convention center, and somebody from the Canadian Legion invited us back to their local post, and the president or post commander, they told us we weren't welcome in the Legion, and we were dressed in our jackets and ties and with our wives, and they told us, get off the steps and get off the property. They come up with that article in the paper, and we never asked for any plaques. We don't know where that came from, but the Legion said they don't want any plaques put on government buildings for Canadian Vietnam veterans. They considered us mercenaries and traitors and a lot of other nasty words. And I'll never understand why. To this day, I still don't understand why the animosity between a lot of those Second World War vets and us. When we took our oath, we would take our oath of allegiance to the United States of America. We joined the U.S. Army.
How do you feel when they say you can't serve two masters? Is that fair to say that? They're kind of saying here, it says here, if you're, well, they say you can't swear an oath to, yeah, you can't serve two masters.
But we weren't fighting against Canada. I mean, Canada was very heavily involved in the war in Vietnam, and so had a lot of other countries, Australia, New Zealand, the Koreans. There was a lot of other foreign troops there. And at the time, I believe we were fighting for the principles of freedom and democracy, the same as my father did in the Second World War. So I don't know where that really applies. We never served two masters. We thought we were serving Canada in our own way.
Manitoba Public Insurance, who takes care of insurance and vehicle insurance in the province of Manitoba, was issuing veterans plates. The criteria for getting a plate is you had to have served 3 years in the service or been in combat. I applied for and got a license plate, and about 11 months later I got a letter in the mail saying I had to turn my plates in because a mistake had been made. When I went to the Royal Canadian Legion and asked them, why am I having my plate taken away from me? Oh, there's technical problems, we can't tell you why. So I had to turn in my veterans plates.
When they took Ron's away, I filed a grievance with the Manitoba Human Rights Commission. And this went on for 2 or 3 years. And finally they come out with a ruling that they couldn't rule on it because Manitoba government was involved in it. And that was the end of the story on it.
So now on the back of my truck I got support our troops. But there is a little extra story to this. My story went, I guess, somewhat viral. I get a set of license plates in the mail, Vietnam Veterans of America plates. The veterans that sent them heard my story. They said, I hope you'll be able to display one of these plates somewhere on your truck. The vet down in the States that read about that and thought that's a bunch of bullshit. I'm going to give him a set of my old plates. And he did. And to hell with the Royal Canadian Legion license plate program.
Welcome to our Memorial Day Parade and Service. Today we honor all those who served in wars to defend our country. Throughout our history, young men and women have voluntarily left the safety and security of home, taken up arms to defend our freedoms and our way of life. The price of freedom is high. The sea of crosses that fill the military cemeteries in the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia are a terrible reminder of the cost of war. Today we remember them, For sacrifice without remembrance is meaningless. All parties dismissed. Thank you all for attending our Memorial Day service.
This is Brookside Cemetery. It's the second largest military cemetery in Canada.
What are you thinking right now?
This is the gravesite of my friend Larry Collins. He was killed May 1st in 1969. It brings back a lot of memories because I'll always remember Larry, very close and dear friend.
Looking back now, how do you feel about it?
I'm still proud that I fought in it. The politics were crazy, but we were told that we were going to Vietnam to stop the communists. It was good enough for me. I mean, 21-year-old soldiers really aren't into politics. We hear something, okay, if that's why we're going, it sounds good to me.
Any regrets?
No regrets at all. We want people to realize the fact there was a lot of Canadians that served, but the fact that a lot of Canadians died. And we pass on the word that Canadians did serve. A lot of people think that Canada wasn't in a war from Korea to Afghanistan, which is a span of about 50 years. But there was a generation that served in Vietnam. And I think to a man, they will tell you, we believed we were fighting for Canada as well as the United States.
The purpose of our memorial wall is to honor and remember all our fellow Canadians that died over in Vietnam. It was put together in '74, I believe, and it's from a veteran in Fargo Air Museum that put it together. We travel around with our wall. This is the first time we've been to Watertown. We're trying to get it to as many veteran events as possible during the summer. What happened was the Gordy West, he was a veteran from here in South Dakota. He came up to North Dakota to a wedding reception for a friend of ours, another veteran, and I was talking to him, and he didn't know anything about Canadians and served, and I gave him a brochure on our memorial wall, and he says, wow, we've got to bring you guys down to Waterton, South Dakota. So that's how this all came about.
Has it been a success?
Oh, it's a tremendous success. The veterans have treated us so nice here. They've done everything for us. It's unbelievable.
And American hospitality? How's that?
The American hospitality is just undescribable. It's been just fantastic.
You see they walk up and thank you for your service. Does that happen all the time?
It happens all the time down here. If I'm wearing a Vietnam veteran's hat, or if they can identify me as a veteran, whether I'm in grocery store, Menards, hardware store, people walk up and say thank you for your service.
How do you feel right now?
I feel very honored to be here at this November 11th service here down in Watertown, South Dakota. It makes me feel very proud, and I'm proud to have served with the American forces in Vietnam.
At this time, I'm going to read a proclamation from the Governor of South Dakota. I, Christy Ohm, Governor of the great state of South Dakota, do hereby proclaim November 8th through the 11th, 2019, as Canadian Vietnam Veterans Days in South Dakota. At this time, we're going to introduce the distinguished guests up on stage.
Up in Canada, we call it Remembrance Day. Today is Remembrance Day. And that's really what it is all about. Remember those patriots who sacrificed everything they had so we can enjoy the freedoms that we have today and kind of take for granted sometimes.
After watching the war on TV every night on the news, myself and my 3 friends, we decided to cross the border and sign up with our American brothers. And we knew we were going to go to Vietnam and do what we could to help out there. My friend Larry was killed in action on May 1st, 1969. I never regretted my experiences in Vietnam, and coming down here, I'm honored and proud to do it. Thank you to the veterans and the people of Watertown for the reception we've had here. It's just been absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much. Oh, I feel just elated right now. It's just a peak experience being down here and being so welcomed by the veterans here. Oh yeah, it's I could stay down here for another 2 weeks. We get treated so well here. When we came down here, when they invited us down here, they paid for our hotel rooms, they paid for our transportation costs, they paid for our meals. I can't say enough about the reception and that we got for the veterans down here. It's just been terrific. We don't get this reception back in Canada. It's a totally different experience.
God bless you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. May I give you a hug?
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And I really liked yours too, short and sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
My hat off to you. My hat off to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Take care of Jim for me.
I can't.
Oh.
It's too fast for me.
got you guys up there. Thank you very much. Thank you for all you did.
Good job. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh,
We
thank you.
appreciate you being here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for your service. too.
Next time, come when it's warmer, okay?
Thank you.
Really great for us, really. Thank you. Thank you. You have to have a hug.
Yes.
It was fun.
Hey, Jim.
See you at the VF after you go out to the other place.
Yeah, for sure. I'll buy you a beer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you guys were able to come down to the wall. It was fantastic.
I'm sorry you had to go in the Marine Corps, but someone had to do it.
Have a safe trip home.
Thank you very much.
Come and see us again.
I will.
We'll still welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
As a thing of history, and I'm a former military person down here.
This film isn't about me. It's about our brothers I served with and all the 149 Canadians that are on our Canadian Memorial Wall. We'll never forget them.
I want to stress is that we wouldn't be here doing our bit as helping Canadian Vietnam veterans if it wasn't for our wives, Rob's wife Shirley and my wife Connie. It's 36 years we've been doing this, and the ladies have helped immensely, and we couldn't have done it without them. And kudos to them, because it wasn't their war, but they've supported us from day one, and they're gold. It's not a story about me or anybody else that's been interviewed today. It's a story of thousands of Canadians who went and served honorably and helped our southern neighbor fight in a war that we believed in. And we served with honor, we served with pride, and some of us died. So this makes a documentary like this worth watching. I was Bravo Battery, 320th Artillery, 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne, and damn proud of that.